Staying up later, Carl Reiner is back. Last time we talked about the Dick Van Dyke Show. Tonight, on to adventures with Mel Brooks and Sid Caesar and some of the movie work that Carl has been involved in. Let's go to your show of shows. The show of shows was on from 1950 to 54 on Saturday nights,
right,
from 9 until 10:30 Eastern Time. Is it a stretch or fair to say that in some ways there were elements of Saturday Night Live? Not just because it was Saturday, but some of the things that were done.
It was the review format, and it hadn't been done. The show of shows didn't invent it. It was done on Broadway, but Max Liebman, who had been working in places like Tammet, these summer resorts that put on reviews, 3 weeks of new reviews, and then they'd repeat. So at least he knew how to do 3 in a row without repeating. Now he was asked to do 39 in a row, and it was a little more difficult. The very first review was, it can't be done. Sid can't do a monologue every week. They said, how is he going to come up with? He came up with 300 monologues, you know, and it could be done if you get enough of the great writers that we got.
How biting was the satire in the context of the times, and how much of the success was simply the great comedic ability of the cast?
I think that was the biggest success, the comedic ability of the cast and the writers. The satire was minimal compared to what we're seeing today. We didn't satirize any political things. It was verboten. It was during the McCarthy days. We'd all be arrested if we made fun of the government or the workings of the government.
If not arrested, at least you wouldn't work.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't work, yes. Arrested, our development would have been arrested. And, but so we satirized the things that were safe. We satirized the television shows, motion pictures, foreign movies, the basic behavior of people in the suburbs, pantomimes. That was not satirized. But there was a thing called the cliches. We satirized human behavior. That was satire, but we didn't do political satire. My God, the Saturday Night Update with Dennis Miller, we would have been off the air.
You used to do that interview thing where you were always the trench-coated interviewer.
Still have that trench coat.
And and Caesar would be walking by.
The world's greatest something.
Right, and he was always a professor of something. He was professor von Gesundheit. It was always von something or other that indicated some preposterous claim to expertise.
Right. One of the famous jokes, I asked him a long, involved space question, and he was contemplating this question. I said, is it true that the pulsating universe is in the unified field theory, or whatever it was, a long question, and he was contemplating this, and he says, is that infected? This little thing there, it hurts a lot. I said, would you answer? Well, go on, next question. He didn't, but I mean, he always had those wonderful moments where he was caught.
How much of what we feel about a program like Sid Caesar's is nostalgia for a certain time where television was new? People said, wait a minute, we can all sit at home, and in a communal experience, the next day in the office, we can all be talking about what we saw, Uncle Milty or Sid Caesar, whatever. How much of it is that, and how much is the true objective quality of the programs? I can't give you percentages, but I think it has got both, because I look at some of them now. Some of them are make me laugh, and others, when I say, well, that's what we were doing at the time. They're not particularly great. But the nostalgia thing is tremendous. I mean, if you saw it as a kid, but then we have things like the takeoff of This Is Your Life, which is sheer hilarious comedy. I saw it in the theater. They put it in the theater once, 10 from your show of shows, and I heard, I've described this before, I heard a woman screaming with laughter. Just, screaming behind me. It wasn't behind me, it was coming from me. I was laughing so hard, I didn't realize, I'd never made a sound like that before. The commitment to love, when these two people saw each other, and Sid Caesar saw his old cronies on the show. He was supposed to be Al Dunsey, whatever it is, and he saw his Uncle Goopy. Uncle Goopy, and they started to shake with love, and Uncle Goopy would never let go. They were so happy to be reunited, and they played the excessive amount of love. They went past the point of no return. There was a very nice little picture several years ago, My Favorite Year, which obviously was loosely based on the collection of characters who wrote for the show of shows.
Right.
How accurate?
There were moments of accuracy, a lot of moments. There was one moment, one part of it that I felt was wonderful. There was one writer in this thing who never spoke. He just mumbled, and the other writer would carry it. This was a non-talking writer. That was Neil Simon. Neil Simon was very quiet. He has the voice of a turtle, very quiet voice. And I used to sit next to him. I'm noisy. And I would scream. I would say, Neil's got it, Doc, in those days. Doc's got it. And I would say what Doc had just said. And we'd go into the script. But Doc would be afraid to get up and and compete with these maniacs. So he's afraid he'd be shot down because they do shoot you down in that room. What are you talking? What do you know? You think that's funny? I'll show you what's funny. A lot of that going on.
Who was the most productive?
The most would me, probably me. No. There was no such thing. It was a symbiotic thing. I remember the challenges where somebody would come in and say, that's no good. Yeah, we'll come up with something better. I could come up with something better in 5 minutes. I remember Mel Brooks once came in late. I never forget this. He came in late because he was an insomniac. He always came in after everybody had started. We get some script pages done, and Sid would say, what are you so late? His bagel and coffee always preceded him by 10 minutes. We knew he was coming. He'd call in for a bagel and coffee from the 6th Avenue Delicatessen, and would come. Once I paid $20 tip to shame him because he had to pay us back. But he came in and said, this is not funny. They were working on a joke, I think, about, it was a carrot joke. You know, you eat a carrot, you know, good for your eyesight. We said, a carrot joke? You're going to come? There's no new carrot joke. It's a dull, dead joke. And Mel said, I'll come up with it. I'll come up with a carrot joke that nobody's ever heard. And he was up against the wall. He's like plastered the wall with pins. You could see him like a butterfly up against the wall. I'll come up. He says, he ate so many carrots that he couldn't sleep at night. Why? Because he saw through his eyelids. Now, that was a joke that never, and we applauded and said, okay, you win.
Where'd the idea for the 2,000-year-old man come from?
I know exactly where it came from. And
I figured you might.
No, because there have been many things written, and if enough people watch this show, they will know for all time. There was a show called We the People Speak, where Dan Seymour, who was later to become the head of J. Walter Thompson, had a show called We the People Speak, which was on radio, now was converted to television. And I was home one night, and I heard him say, this man was actually in Stalin's toilet when he heard Stalin say, I got to blow up the world Thursday. And they'd recreate the moment. And I came in the office. I said, did anybody see We the People the other night? I said, incredible, absolutely incredible. Guy was saying that he's going to blow up the world, that he heard it in Stalin's toilet. I said, if it's true, tell the president. Don't tell America. Scaring the pants off people. And I turned to Mel Brooks. I was sitting on a couch. He was here. And I said, here's a man who's actually at the, and I did Dan Seymour's voice. Here's a man who's actually at the scene of the crucifixion. Isn't that true, sir? Oh, boy, he said. Yeah. And then from then on, I started to interview Mel for the next 10 years. Anytime we got bored, Mel, I knew he had things he did like Jewish pirates. He did all kind of crazy characters, just entertain us. And now I had him forever.
You'd ask him a question about something of great historic significance, some transcendent figure out of the history books, and he would focus with great earnestness on some inane aspect of their alleged... Leif Erikson loved pastrami, right?
Freud was a good basketball player. Could dribble good. Wasn't a good shooter, but a good dribbler. Never didn't know about Freud. Yeah, he'd always do that. Shakespeare wasn't a good writer. He made dots and ends. And he wasn't a good writer. No, he made blots all over the paper. His ends look like an M. He never crossed the T's, never dotted the I. He wasn't a good writer. He always did that. He deprecated people quickly.
Now, yeah. A lot of that had to be off the cuff.
All of it was off the cuff. That's what was the beauty part of it, as we used to say. The first record was 47 minutes. It was 2 hours of ad lib. The second record, the same thing. And on the second record, we had Brendan Bain was in the audience, and Mel didn't know it. Mel would have gotten frightened to know that a brain was in an audience like that. So we didn't tell him. But at the end of the session, Brendan Bain raised his hand in the middle of the session. He says, "Can I go to the toilet?" He said, "There's no comment on your performance. I have to go to the toilet." So he went to the toilet. He said, "That's Brendan Bain." Yeah, I said, "Yeah, I didn't want to tell you." Now, in between, he comes up to me. He says, "I have a new motto. Bricht harch mir nicht, fricht broch." He said something in Gaelic. And what it was, I asked Mel in the record, I said, when you lived in caves, did you have... He said, "Oh, yes, we all lived in caves. I lived in everybody had a number on the cave. When the cave, every number, we had a cave." And he says, I said, "We're like little entities, a clan, a cave." I said, "Did you have a national anthem?" Every cave had a national anthem. "Oh, sure." I said, "Do you remember your national anthem?"
I certainly do. I'll never forget it. You don't forget a national anthem in a minute.
Let me hear it, sir.
Let them all go to hell except Cave 76.
And that, Brendan Bain picked up on that. He said it's the most brilliant thing our national anthem has ever done.
Let them all go to hell except Cave Cave 76.
When did you first discover that your son Rob was funny?
The first time I knew he had great talent, the first time I discovered it was when Norman Lear told me when he was 10 years old on Fire Island. He said, "Your son is hilarious." I said, "What, Rob, hilarious? He's a quiet kid. He's dour." He did a thing with cheating at Jack's with my daughter Ellen. And it's the first time I'd heard he was funny. Rob, I knew, had a great sense of humor. He laughed always since he's a little kid. He always laughed at the right things. He became fans of, of Soupy Sales and the Three Stooges and all that. And then his taste developed, and now he's the best filmmaker I know.
Your new film is Sibling Rivalry. Is there a gentle father and son rivalry? He's such an accomplished filmmaker. Princess Bride and Spinal Tap and When Harry Met Sally and Stand By Me.
Yeah, I became very aware when he started doing pictures and directing better than I direct. I became very aware of it. And then I was so happy to find that I'm really, truly a father. I was more happy than I was. You always worry about your own power, my losing my power, my ability. You worry about that. When you see the world pass you by, I mean, new music, new. I thank God you're wearing this kind of clothes, but I can't wear the modern clothes. And so when your own son becomes that, there is that feeling, oh, my God, he's passed me by. I remember saying that when I had my third child. My father only had two. I said, so I must have, and he must have, I never talked about it, but he must have said, he had one more child than I did. The competition is there, but what a wonderful thing to compete with somebody you love. And wish them well. You don't ever want to beat them. You don't want to. I don't want to make movies that are a bit more successful in him. I'm making this. The last movie, Sibling Rivalry, I made for Castle Rock. I'm hoping it's successful for him and me.
What sort of film can you do that he can't, or at least not as well? And
None.
What can he do that you wouldn't try?
None. Oh, there are many. He did Misery. I would never. He did Stephen King's novel Misery, adapted for the screen by Bill Goldman. I saw it. It's sensational. It's a genre I always admired. I don't know what you call it. It's not horror. It's not a horror movie, but it is very. It makes you very emotionally nervous. I can't do that. I don't know if I could. If I were told to by the Army. The Army is the only one who ever told you have to do chin-ups. You do them. I don't know if I could have done it, but I certainly couldn't have done The Princess Bride. I might have been able to do, but not like him. He tread a wonderful thin line. Spinal Tap was it for me. I mean, I never would. It was his milieu, his life, the rock life. That's part of. But he and his three buddies pulled off something that I think is a classic for all time.
You've done some pictures with Steve Martin.
4 of them.
One of them is one of my favorites. Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. Where did the idea of intercutting this so that it actually appeared as if Martin was interacting with Barbara Stanwyck and Cary Grant and Humphrey Bogart and all the others? Where'd that come from?
Steve Martin, George Geip, a writer, and myself were sitting in a Thai restaurant saying, let's do something in the 40s, a musical or something black and white. And we don't know how the idea, who popped it up. We talked about it. We said, who said it? I know I carried the ball because I'm the one who had to sell it to the studios. And I thought it was the best idea we ever had. And also the most fun idea to implement because it required sitting in a room for days and days and days looking at old film, wonderful old film, and saying, there's a line we could use. And George would say, that could be done here. And we had to write a story. It's like doing a jigsaw puzzle, interstitial all these crazy lines. And then we had John DeCure, one of the great art directors, recreated 92 sets, pieces of sets that existed in other movies. Edith Head made costumes that existed and had silkscreen prints made when Steve Martin had to play James Cagney's mother wearing a dress. We had to build a silkscreen dress, a print, because it had to match what his mother was wearing.
They all matched perfectly.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary...
The look was identical.
It was an extraordinary... I think the technical aspects of that were as good as the comedic aspects.
Wasn't that one of the very last films Edith had worked on?
It was the last film she worked on. We dedicated it to her.
Yeah,
she
I remember that, the credit at the very end.
Oh, yeah,
right?
She was so wonderful. She came in with a hat for Rachel Ward to wear at the beginning. This was worn by either Ingrid Bergman, I can't remember, Ava Gardner. She says, it's a very important hat to me. Don't do anything to this hat. We usually have doubles, when you drop a hat on the floor, step on it. We were so careful with that hat. We didn't care about anything but that hat. I remember her so fondly. She was so sweet. The last day we were shooting, she made a dress for Steve Martin to wear as Barbara Stanwyck. Steve was going to be Barbara Stanwyck with Fred MacMurray once. She came to the set there very old, very ready to shuffle off the mortal coil, and she lay down on the couch in the one of the sets, the detective set. I put a blanket over her. She slept for an hour or two, but she came to see her last costume, and about 2 weeks later she was gone. But boy, what a wonderful woman.
What's the premise quickly of Sibling Rivalry? As we tape here, I haven't seen it, but it's been out in the theaters now for a while.
You should get out of this thing. You know, your problem is you sit home, and is your mother, you know, you sit home every night talking to people. You never get to the movies. Well, it's, if you don't pay attention to the needs of your spouse, and in this case, a doctor played by Scott Bakula is more interested in other people's intestines than he is in his wife's. And they don't communicate, and they don't have sex. And she, because of frustration and because her sister, who's a wild one, suggests that she doesn't know what life is because she married the first man who felt her up, which is what she says in the movie, go out and have an affair. And she gets furious. And next thing she meets is Sam Elliott in a supermarket, who said, "Ma'am, you dented your cheese." She puts a big can on it. She does have to go and try one time to see if her husband is doing it right. And that's the beginning of it, and the rest you're going to have to pay for.
When a movie gets mixed reviews, is it instructive? Are the negative reviews instructive or just wounding?
I am so happy you asked me that question. This is the first time in the history of my life that I have not read one review. I have heard 2 comments came from me from one of the heads of Castle Rock about something said about one of the actors in it. I wanted to go and strangle that person. The man said that one of the actors was to, I can't even repeat it because I'm so angry. I know comedy better than this guy, and he was saying this guy's not funny. He's hilarious. Rob, my whole was hysterical. One guy picked on it. I stopped reading reviews. I will read the reviews maybe a month down the line, 2 months down the line, maybe to do a piece on critics, because a wonderful piece was done in the calendar section of the Los Angeles Times about criticism and critics. And people who are called critics, you know, George Bernard Shaw was a critic. You know, Beerbaum was a critic. These are not critics. These are people who are using the entertainment industry to write columns and do things. When they say things like, there was one thing quoted to me. I didn't read it. I swear I didn't read any of them. I don't want to, because I don't want to have to defend against things. I know what I started to do. I started to make this comedy. I made it it came out exactly as I dreamt it would.
This was great to spend 2 nights with Carl Reiner. His flick, Sibling Rivalry, is out of theater near you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed it.
Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
If it's anybody other than San Francisco, you call me after January 27th, okay? We're out of here. See you later.